And Marie, the other news that's been bubbling over the last couple of weeks, the possibility of a full-blown Russian military invasion of Ukraine, which remains extremely high today, as more than 100,000 troops are now deployed along the country's border. Secretary of State Antony Blinken held talks with his Russian counterpart in Geneva earlier in an effort to prevent a conflict. This morning's discussions didn't end with any resolutions, but Blinken said he felt the meeting was productive.
Based on the discussions today, Foreign Minister Lavrov and I agreed that it's important for the diplomatic process to continue. I told him that following the consultations that we'll have in the coming days with allies and partners, we anticipate that we will be able to share with Russia our concerns and ideas in more detail and in writing next week. And we agreed to further discussions after that. We agreed as well that further diplomatic discussions would be the preferable way forward. But again, it is really up to Russia to decide which path it will pursue.
Holly Williams has more from Kyiv.
Well, here in Kyiv, we're around 5,000 miles from America. But the U.S. says this is not simply a regional dispute far from home. Instead, it's about protecting democracy and stopping Russia from turning its neighbors into puppet states.
There is no doubt, let there be no doubt at all, that if Putin makes this choice, Russia will pay a heavy price.
The U.S. is warning Russia if it invades its neighbour Ukraine, it faces a swift, severe response in the form of sanctions. Moscow denies it's planning an attack, but new satellite images show the massive buildup of Russian troops and weaponry along Ukraine's border. President Biden said a Russian incursion might not use conventional tactics.
And paramilitary tactics, so-called gray zone attacks, and actions by Russian soldiers not wearing Russian uniforms.
To lower tensions, Russia's demanding security guarantees, including a rolling back of NATO troops from Eastern Europe and a ban on Ukraine joining the alliance. Those are things the US and its partners say they cannot agree to. And many believe the real motive of President Vladimir Putin is to control Russia's neighbours by any means possible.
He worked like a terrorist with nuclear weapons, but he's still terrorist.
He's a terrorist.
It looks like that.
It's been 30 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. But now a European capital is again looking down the barrel of a Russian gun. Ukrainians are frightened.
Because it's not only the threat for Ukraine, it's a threat for all the world.
We want a normal life, how we want it, not anybody telling us what to do.
The US is sending up to $200 million worth of emergency military aid here to Ukraine, and it's authorized its allies to transfer American-made anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons to Ukraine. But the US has ruled out sending combat troops. Anne-Marie and Vlad.
Holly, thank you very much. Let's bring in Christina Ruffini. She's in Geneva following these diplomatic talks. So, Christina, Blinken was asked today why the United States says it won't put troops in Ukraine, and if that will hold if Russia does invade. What was his response?
Well, good morning, guys. He dodged the second part of the question a little bit, but he really reiterated that, look, Ukraine is not a NATO member. You know, the Article 5 provision in NATO says, you know, if you invade one of us, you invade all of us, we'll come to your defense. Ukraine is not a NATO member. And so the implication there seemed to be that it would almost undercut the NATO alliance to promise that troops would go in to defend a country that's not a member of that alliance. Now, it did reiterate that the U.S. has been providing material support. It's providing training. Earlier this week, CBS confirmed that the U.S. gave permission for 3 NATO members, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, to rush other U.S.-made military aid, weapon systems, anti-tank missiles to Ukraine so that it can better protect itself. But they seem to be holding firm on that U.S. forces will not be going into Ukraine to defend it, even if Russia invades.
So earlier today, you heard from Russia's deputy foreign minister. Can you explain that interaction?
I did, and I think we have a clip we'll show you in just a minute. This took place outside right before the meeting. The Russian press corps and the U.S. press corps were holding. We were about to be swept by security, and we looked over and saw the deputy foreign minister was speaking in Russian to the Russian press corps. So a few of my colleagues went over and tried to ask him some questions in English, which he ignored. And then in order to kind of get away from us, he ducked under a staircase. Unfortunately for him, the only exit was out through the coat room and through a bunch of coat racks in the hotel, which is where CBS found him. I think we've got the clip.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
So is Russia intimidated by Ukraine? Why are you afraid of Ukraine? Why do you feel you need to protect yourself, as you said?
We are not afraid of anyone, even not of the U.S.
And I want to explain my question a little bit there. The reason I asked that question is because Russia's position has been that its action along the Ukrainian border is defensive, right? Its problem with NATO is that Ukraine and NATO are posing a threat to Moscow. And a week before last, when the Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman gave her press conference after her talks with the Russians, she basically said it doesn't make sense that Russia, which has this huge standing army and one of the biggest nuclear arsenals in the world, would be intimidated or afraid of Ukraine. So I asked him, if that argument held water, why are they afraid of Ukraine? And he said, as you heard, Russia is not afraid of anyone, not even the U.S.
So when it comes to a response to Russian aggression in Ukraine, I guess, Christina, the question becomes how closely aligned are the allies? How closely aligned? I understand all of the NATO practices and policies that are in place, but is everybody on the same page, I guess is my question.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we heard President Biden in that press conference undercut a little bit the diplomatic work Secretary Blinken has been doing in Europe, first in Ukraine and in Germany, really trying to at least outwardly provide a united front and say NATO allies and European allies are absolutely on the same page. You heard President Biden say there are differences about what sanctions and how to implement that. I reached out to some State Department officials and they said, look, everyone is agreed on the big picture. They're agreed that if Russia goes in, everyone needs to come together and do something significant, but they're not quite agreed on what to target exactly or the mechanism by which to do it. But Secretary Blinken reiterated again today that there is unity with the allies on countering Russian aggression and the need for action. He said the U.S. is prepared to continue diplomatic talks. It seems like the Russians are as well. However, they are also prepared for other eventualities.
So really interesting as well, Secretary Blinken mentioned 2 American detainees in Russia. They've actually been there for years. Can you talk about who they are and how his request for their release plays into this situation?
So he mentioned by name Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed in his opening remarks at the meeting. And that's significant because although we ask about the Americans when diplomats meet with the Russians, I don't recall him name checking them in an open discussion in front of reporters before. And that's because, Secretary Blinken said they went on tourist visas. They're there on trumped up espionage charges. There's been intermittent, delays in diplomatic access. They're in these Russian prisons, which are not good on a good day, but with COVID and everything else, it's a really dire situation, and American officials are always concerned about Americans detained abroad, but especially in this case because they feel like Russia is trying to use them for leverage. So that was something that Secretary brought up at the top of the meeting while reporters were still in the room, and we imagine they will continue to talk to their Russian counterparts about possibly, hopefully, maybe releasing them at some point in the future as these discussions continue.
All right, Christina, thank you very much.